And Jim, at that news conference, we heard some pretty strong hints about restrictions potentially being lifted sooner than planned. It looks like this Sunday's news conference with the Premier will be another one that Victorians are hanging on every word for.
All carrots and sticks, isn't it? In effect, what the Premier is saying, if the better behaved Victorians, and particularly Melburnians, are, the greater chance there is of easing of restrictions. Now, the figures, as they've been over the past few days, and particularly today, are heading in the right direction. I don't think there'll be massive changes that we see come Sunday, but if things continue at the same pace as they are now, there will be something. Now, it's worth reiterating a point that I've made over many weeks now, which is that the situation for Daniel Andrews after the massive spike in COVID cases that we saw here is that he simply cannot afford to have a third wave, and therefore, regardless of the cost to him, he's going to be extremely cautious about the way in which Victoria opens up. That's very frustrating for business, there's no doubt about that, but it's interesting that if opinion polling consistently is to be believed, Victorians have been remarkably accepting, if not supportive, of what the Premier's been doing and saying, and also not that comfortable with the way in which the federal government has been approaching it. If I can put it this way, it is that Daniel Andrews appears not to be playing politics with this. Now, that appears not to be playing politics. He's a politician. What politicians do is politics. On the other hand, the default position of the federal government, and particularly people like Josh Frydenberg, is to go for an apparently party political approach. Now, I think given the groundwork that Daniel Andrews has done over the past 3 months with these constant media appearances, he appears not to be political. That has worked as far as the acceptance that we're seeing by a large part of the Victorian community, whereas they don't, I think, appreciate the kind of partisan politics they appear to be seeing from people like Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison, frustrated, and understandably so, as they are at Victoria's economy being a dead weight on the recovery out of the worst of the pandemic.
Jim, just on another matter, one thing that no politician wants to be seen playing politics with is corruption. We've seen a real focus on that today in New South Wales Parliament, as we've been reporting, and in Canberra, where we've learnt that the AFP is now investigating possible corruption of public servants involved in that $30 million land purchase in Western Sydney. It does seem there's plenty more to come on that story. One positive, though, is the Audit Office, head of the Audit Office pointed out this morning, was that it's showing that the checks and balances are in place, that when things like this happen, there is someone picking it up.
Yes, they are, but it's also interesting, is it not, that the Audit Office have been seeking additional funding with this situation involving Badgerys Creek, the Leppington Triangle, it's so called. The fact that they haven't got that money does suggest that the government's not really listening to the seriousness of what's being uncovered here. I would have thought in these circumstances a government would be wise and prudent indeed to make sure that the Audit Office does have the resources it needs to uncover circumstances of this kind. I think the other thing I would say too is it makes the argument yet again for the necessity for a National Integrity Commission with teeth, not the kind of toothless tiger that's sitting and has been sitting for some time on Christian Porter's desk. Now, the problem there is, as we've seen with people within the coalition like Queensland Senator Gerard Rennick, who do not want any form of National Integrity Commission, while on the other hand, the Labor Party, the Greens, and at least some of the Senate crossbench want something that's much more substantial than's being offered or being proposed or suggested, as far as we know, in what Scott Morrison and Christian Porter are talking about, that this is really an impossible dilemma for the government. They can neither satisfy those reluctant individuals on their backbench nor the crossbench or a section of it in the Senate and the Labor Party and the Greens certainly, and I suspect not public opinion either. With this episode that we've seen in relation to Badgerys Creek, I'd have thought that the requirement for a National Integrity Commission of some kind, or certainly with teeth, is pretty much irresistible.
Yeah, you think that it'd be pretty popular electorally, as you point out. Jim Middleton, always appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
My pleasure.